Have you ever looked at your own life or maybe your team at work or even just an organization you volunteer for and realized that you are just incredibly busy?
Oh, constantly.
Right. Like you're running at absolute full speed, but somehow you still feel completely scattered.
Yeah.
The calendar is packed, the to-do list is checked off every single week. People are just exhausted, and yet there's this quiet, lingering feeling that you aren't actually getting anywhere.
It's a very specific kind of exhaustion, I think. It's the exhaustion of motion without direction.
Exactly.
And we see it everywhere, right? Like individuals trying to optimize their morning routines. We see it in Fortune 500 corporations. And, well, as we are going to explore today in this deep dive, we see it in deeply well-intentioned faith-based organizations too.
Yeah, so today we are looking at a framework, and this was originally designed for church missions ministries, but it actually contains one of the most ruthless audits of human busyness I have ever read.
It really does. It
Yeah.
pulls no punches.
No, it doesn't. The document is called From Activity to Alignment, and it just attacks this lie we all seem to inherently believe, this idea that, well, doing things means you are actually getting things done.
Right.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack how to audit your activities, how to build true partnerships, establish healthy governance, and most importantly, bridge that massive gap between knowing what you're supposed to do and actually being ready to do it.
No.
Because what we are really dissecting today is coherence.
Okay, coherence.
Yeah, it is the deeply uncomfortable process of making sure that the things we do day in and day out actually match the things we claim to value. The text frames this as moving from fragmented busyness to intentional alignment.
Right.
And while the context is a congregation trying to figure out its mission in the world, the diagnostic tools they are using are essentially like masterclasses in organizational psychology and personal development, for that matter.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because it is incredibly easy to assume you are aligned just because everyone around you is sweating.
Yes. The illusion of hard work. Exactly. I was thinking about it like the difference between running on a treadmill and running a marathon.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Because on a treadmill, you are putting in maximum effort, your heart rate is up, you are completely exhausted by the end of the hour, but
You haven't actually traveled an inch.
right, you are in the exact same geographic location you were when you started. But in a marathon, you are expending that same energy, but there is an actual route. You are covering ground. You are moving toward a specific destination.
And that visualization captures the exact trap the source material describes. The text points out that many of these organizations are doing objectively good things.
Like what?
Well, they run programs, they hold meetings, they organize outreach efforts. Needs are actively being met, but over time, they inherit habits.
Yeah, habits just sort of take over.
Exactly. They start responding to whatever urgent, immediate need happens to be screaming the loudest that week. And what began as a conscious, purposeful decision slowly hardens into a disconnected routine.
Obedience hardening into routine. That phrase from the text just hit me so hard.
It's a heavy concept.
It really is. It means you started doing something for a very specific, deliberate reason, but 5 years later, you are just doing it because, well, it happens to be what you do on Tuesday nights.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a fundamental flaw in human psychology.
How so?
Well, the brain loves routine because it burns fewer calories. When a new initiative starts, it requires cognitive load. You have to think about why you are doing it, who it serves, what the goal is. But over time, the brain habituates.
The autopilot turns on.
Exactly. The why drops away entirely and only the what remains. And the text warns that this kind of activity creates the appearance of health while hiding deep fragmentation underneath.
So the calendar is full, so leadership just assumes the organization is thriving.
Yep, but the life of the organization is completely divided. What it says it believes and how it actually operates have drifted miles apart.
Wow. And this is where the concept of missional coherence comes in. And I have to be honest, when I first read that term, it sounded incredibly intense.
Oh, it sounds very academic.
Yeah, it sounds like jargon that some consultant charges you $50,000 to write on a whiteboard, you know?
It definitely has that ring to it.
Yeah.
But stripped of the academic tone, it is wildly practical. Missional coherence does not mean doing more things.
Right.
In almost every case, it actually means doing significantly fewer things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it means ensuring that your theology, or if you are translating this to a secular context for yourself, your core values or your company culture moves in lockstep with your structure, your priorities, and your daily actions.
Okay, so vision has to become more than just like language painted on a lobby wall.
Exactly. And strategy has to be more than a forgotten PDF in a shared drive.
Okay, so if we translate that to a startup, missional coherence is basically making sure your marketing team, your product developers, and your HR department are actually trying to build the same company.
Yes, spot on.
Like, if marketing is selling a luxury lifestyle brand, but product is building budget software, and HR is hiring purely for technical speed over customer empathy.
Then you have massive activity, but zero coherence.
Right. You're just burning cash on a treadmill.
Precisely. So to solve that treadmill problem, the text introduces a diagnostic tool called Missions Ministry Mapping.
And I'm looking at this section on mapping, and I gotta say, my eyes immediately glazed over the first time I read it.
It sounds like a chore, doesn't it?
It sounds like administrative dread. I just picture endless spreadsheets, organizational charts, and a room covered in color-coded sticky notes while someone drones on about synergy. Please tell me I am wrong about this.
Well, you are not entirely wrong about the aesthetic of it. It often involves a lot of spreadsheets, but the text argues that the process itself is deeply philosophical.
Philosophical.
Yeah, it is an act of discernment. It isn't just taking inventory of your programs and categorizing your budget. It is forcing an entire organization to hit pause and ask some terrifyingly fundamental questions.
Like what?
Like, who are we? Where are we actually located in the current landscape? And what specific resources have we been entrusted with?
Ah, so it is forcing you to stand next to the treadmill, look at the machine, and ask, why did we even buy this in the first place? Does anyone actually want to run indoors?
Yes, exactly. It demands an accounting of how your relationships and your structures are serving your actual stated mission, rather than simply maintaining the momentum of the institution.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the author notes something fascinating here. Modern audiences are no longer impressed by institutional busyness.
Wait, really? Because it feels like everyone is always bragging about being busy.
Individually, maybe,
Mm.
but institutionally, people are increasingly drawn to clarity and visible purpose. If an organization does not map its reality, it is doomed to be perpetually reactive. It becomes occupied rather than fruitful.
Wow. And the text highlights that this kind of mapping actually restores trust within a team, which I thought was a brilliant observation.
It changes everything.
It really does. When people can see a transparent process, a shared direction, and a thoughtful path forward, the entire temperature of the room changes.
Yeah.
The conversation shifts from employees or volunteers grumbling in the hallway asking, why are we wasting our time on this, to asking, what are we uniquely equipped to tackle next?
It fundamentally rewires the culture. But, no map is completely filled in.
Right.
Once an organization actually maps out what it is doing and where its boundaries are, the blind spots become glaringly obvious. And that inevitably forces the next critical question.
Which is?
Who are you going to partner with to cover the areas you cannot reach?
Ah, partnerships. The source material gets incredibly honest about human nature and organizational ego right here, because self-sufficiency is such an attractive illusion.
Oh, it really is. And the text makes a profound statement right out of the gate here. It says that no single church or leader carries everything. The mission is always larger than any one congregation or company.
Yeah.
Therefore, seeking partnership is a deliberate rejection of self-sufficiency.
Which is incredibly hard for leaders to swallow. I mean, self-sufficiency feels safe. It feels like total control over the brand, over the budget, over the outcomes.
And control is the operative word there. Partnership is a vulnerability. It is a declaration that the work must be carried in community.
But the text doesn't romanticize this, does it?
Not at all. It offers a massive warning, actually. It says unexamined alliances are dangerous.
Like partnering just for the sake of the press release. Like, oh, they have a massive following, let's attach our logo to their website.
Right. We see that constantly in the corporate world, and the text argues it happens just as often in the nonprofit and faith sectors.
Just chasing clout.
Exactly. Partnering just because a group is highly visible, well-funded, or trending, without doing the grueling work of ensuring philosophical and practical alignment, leads straight to mixed messaging.
So it actually hurts you in the long run.
Definitely. If the methods or the core character of your partner misalign with your values, it will eventually dilute your identity and create widespread confusion among your base.
And the text makes a really sharp distinction here between two types of partnerships, right? Mutuality and dependency.
Yes. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, dependency is unfortunately the default setting for most philanthropic or organizational relationships.
Why is that?
Well, it happens when one party establishes itself as the perpetual giver, the rescuer, the funder, and the other party is locked into the role of the perpetual receiver.
Oh, man.
There are no actual pathways for shared contribution. One partner dictates the terms, the strategy, and the metrics for success, and the other simply follows orders to keep the money flowing.
That dynamic completely strips people of their agency. It turns a relationship into a transaction.
It weakens local ownership, it kills initiative, and ultimately it fails to preserve the dignity of the people doing the work on the ground.
But mutuality is different.
Very different.
Yeah.
Mutuality, as the text defines it, requires shared learning. It honors the inherent value of all participants.
So it's a two-way street.
Exactly. Each partner has to bring something meaningful to the table, and each has to be willing to receive something meaningful. The goal of the relationship isn't control, it's collaboration.
There is a story in the source material that perfectly captures this shift, and I want to spend some time on it because it feels so universal.
Go for it.
So there was a church that had been supporting what they called a distant ministry
Hmm?
for years. And when we say supported, we mean the classic hands-off transactional model.
The dependency model.
Exactly. They mailed a check every quarter, and in return, they received an annual newsletter with some nice photos. But over time, that connection completely withered.
As it always does.
Right. The church members back home started questioning the budget. They were asking, where is this money actually going? What is the long-term vision here? Why are we funding this when we have our own problems?
And, the standard playbook in that scenario is to just let the relationship quietly die.
Right. You just fade out.
Yeah, you slowly reduce the funding over a couple budget cycles, make an excuse about shifting internal priorities, and walk away.
But instead of pulling the plug, the leadership leaned all the way in. They engaged. They initiated incredibly uncomfortable, real conversations.
Which is so brave.
It is. They didn't just demand a forensic accounting of the money. They asked about the partner's actual strategy, their daily challenges, their long-term hopes. And more importantly, they shared their own local context and their own struggles.
You made it mutual.
Yes, they stopped just throwing money over the fence and started sending people, not as auditors or managers to oversee the project, but as learners.
That is a massive shift.
And the real turning point was when they invited leaders from that distant partner ministry to fly to them and speak into their local context. They asked the partner to evaluate them.
Oh, wow. They admitted that the organization they were funding possessed wisdom that they desperately lacked.
Yeah.
That completely flips the power dynamic.
The relationship transformed from a detached financial obligation to an actual mutual relationship. But, okay, I have to push back here on behalf of anyone listening who is obsessed with productivity or anyone who is currently feeling burned out.
Sure, let's hear it.
Because, sure, shared learning sounds beautiful in theory, but if a team is already exhausted, adding relationship work to their plate sounds like a recipe for a total breakdown. Wouldn't it be far more efficient to just write the check, let the partner do what they do best, and stay out of their way?
It would absolutely be more efficient. The text does not shy away from that reality.
Okay.
But what's fascinating here is that the text explicitly states the goal is not efficiency. The goal is shared obedience. The goal is communion in the mission.
Wow. Not efficiency.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if your only metric for success is operational efficiency, you will inevitably default to transactional dependency because it takes a fraction of the time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You'll have to navigate cultural differences, you don't have to sit through awkward translation issues, and you don't have to challenge your own assumptions.
But you also don't grow?
You remain entirely stagnant. If your goal is mutuality, you have to invest the most precious resource you have, which is time. You have to ask the guarding questions before you enter the partnership.
Questions like what?
Like, does this arrangement cultivate mutuality, or does it breed dependency? Does it deepen our actual participation in the work, or does it just allow us to buy our way out of getting our hands dirty?
Man, it takes an unbelievable amount of humility for an organization with the checkbook to pause and say, we don't just want to fund you, we actually need to learn from you.
And that requirement for humility and absolute clarity leads directly into the next major theme of the text.
Right.
Because you can have the most beautifully mapped priorities in the world, and you can have deep, philosophically aligned mutual partnerships. But if you do not know exactly how decisions are made, your mission will eventually stall out and collapse under its own weight.
Which brings us to the most unsexy word in the English language, governance.
Governance. The text calls it the architecture of faithfulness.
The author makes this incredibly bold claim that I highlighted immediately. It says, mission without governance becomes enthusiasm without stability.
It is a brilliant surgical diagnosis of so many organizational failures.
It really is.
Passion, vision, and enthusiasm are fantastic fuel for initiating movement. You need that spark to get the rocket off the launch pad. But passion cannot sustain clarity over a decade.
No, it burns out.
Exactly. Over time, sincere, well-meaning efforts require structure. Without a designated way to decide, evaluate, correct course, and continue, any group of people will drift into profound confusion.
Yeah.
Good intentions will multiply, everyone will start their own little pet projects, and coherence completely diminishes.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because culturally, we are conditioned to view structure and rules as things that hold us back.
We really are.
We tend to view administration as the natural enemy of inspiration. Startups hate corporate structure.
Yeah.
Creative teams hate project managers. We think governance is a cage.
Right, it feels restricting.
But as I was reading this, I realized governance is actually like the traffic lights in a major metropolitan city.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Right. When you are sitting at a red light, it feels like the system is restricting your freedom. It feels like it is holding you back from your destination.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
But those lights do not exist to stop you from driving. They exist to stop you from T-boning another car at the intersection at 60 miles an hour so that everyone on the road can actually reach their destination without mass chaos.
And the text frames it in exactly that light. It argues vehemently that structure is not unspiritual. Order is often the exact environment required for spiritual or meaningful work to become sustainable.
Wow.
The author points out that in the biblical narrative, creation itself unfolds with structure. The early church didn't just vibe their way through problems. They established specific roles, committees, and processes to address internal conflict.
They didn't just ignore it.
No, they didn't ignore disputes in the name of being highly spiritual. They addressed them through organized structural discernment.
Because the alternative is catastrophic.
Truly.
The text lists the predictable outcomes when a system lacks the governance to hold the weight of its own effort. You get massive duplication of effort, where two departments are doing the exact same work without talking to each other.
Yeah, such a waste of energy.
You get intense decision fatigue for leaders, because every single choice has to be debated from scratch. You get massive volunteer or employee frustration, incredibly inconsistent communication, and ultimately total mission drift.
Think about what that looks like on the ground.
Yeah.
The source shares a case study of a group where the mission energy was through the roof, but the coordination was basically non-existent.
I can picture it now.
New ideas were being pitched and launched constantly. The volunteers were deeply eager to help, but because there was no clear governance framework, initiatives began overlapping.
Right.
Leaders found themselves doing nothing but reacting to logistical fires instead of actually guiding the vision. Decisions were made entirely inconsistently, depending on who happened to be the loudest voice in the room on any given Thursday.
Total intersection crash. Everyone thinks they have a green light at the exact same time.
Yes, they were incredibly active, but they were not aligned. So the leadership did the bravest thing they could do.
They hit pause.
They hit pause on everything. And the critical detail here is that they didn't add layers of complexity, they sought clarity. They explicitly defined who was responsible for oversight. They established very simple, transparent criteria for how new initiatives would be evaluated and approved.
Okay.
And they created regular rhythms for reviewing where the resources were going.
And the result, according to the text, wasn't rigidity or a drop in morale. It was freedom.
Exactly.
Leaders could finally lead with confidence because they actually knew where the boundaries were. Volunteers felt secure because they knew exactly how they fit into the bigger picture.
But this raises an important question, though, which the text tackles head-on. There is a very real danger of overstructuring.
Bureaucratic drift. When the traffic lights turn into endless toll booths.
That is a perfect way to say it. You can easily create so many layers of approval, so many oversight committees, and such rigorous reporting requirements that initiative is completely suffocated.
Yeah, people just give up.
Right. People feel discouraged from ever pitching a new idea because the red tape required to get it off the ground is just too thick. That is not faithful governance. That is fear and control masquerading as governance.
So how do you find that balance? How do you know if you have too much structure or too little?
The text suggests that healthy governance is always proportionate.
Proportionate.
Yeah. It provides just enough structure to ensure safety and accountability, but not a single inch more that might prevent agility and responsiveness.
Okay, that makes sense.
And it requires two competing virtues from leaders.
Mm.
First, humility, which is the willingness to listen to the people actually doing the work and adjust the rules when they aren't helping.
And the second.
Second, courage, which is the willingness to make hard, unpopular decisions and enforce the boundaries. Governance is simply the framework that holds that humility and courage together.
Okay, let's play this out. Imagine an organization has done all the heavy lifting. They mapped their mission, so they know what they're doing. They established mutual partnerships, so they know who they're doing it with. They built a healthy, proportionate governance framework so everyone knows how decisions are made.
Sounds perfect.
They have the map, the team, and the traffic lights. The road is clear. Why do they still fail to launch? Because we all know organizations that look perfect on paper but cannot seem to execute.
We absolutely do. And this brings us to one of the most sobering realities in the entire document. Clarity does not automatically produce capacity.
Wow.
Having insight into your problems does not guarantee you have the ability to fix them. We have to talk about readiness.
The massive, terrifying gap between knowing what you need to do and actually doing it.
Exactly. An organization can know exactly what its next step should be. The vision can be perfectly sound, historically accurate, and deeply compelling. But if the people within that organization are not yet formed to carry the weight of that vision, they cannot move forward sustainably.
And usually, leadership misinterprets that, right?
Almost always. The gap between knowing what to do and executing it is almost always interpreted by leadership as rebellion or failure. But the text argues it is usually just immaturity.
Immaturity is not an insult, it is an invitation. That line stopped me in my tracks.
It completely changes the paradigm of leadership, doesn't it?
It really does. If your team isn't executing the brilliant vision you laid out, they aren't necessarily trying to sabotage you. They might just not be ready to carry it.
Right. And readiness, the text explains, is deeply multidimensional. It outlines 4 distinct layers that have to be addressed: spiritual, relational, organizational, and emotional.
Okay, let's unpack those layers. Spiritual readiness, in the context of this faith-based text, involves the deep internal posture of the group. Are they operating out of prayer and dependence, or are they secretly relying entirely on their own talent and funding?
Yeah, that internal foundation.
Yeah.
And then there is relational readiness. A mission is ultimately carried by human beings. If the interpersonal relationships within the team are fractured, competitive, or shallow, the sheer weight of executing a new mission will crush those relationships.
So you need trust.
You must have a foundation of trust
Yeah.
and an established mechanism for resolving conflict before you add stress to the system.
Got it. And organizational readiness is having the actual structures in place to support the new direction, which ties directly back to the governance traffic lights we just talked about.
Exactly.
But the fourth one, emotional readiness, this is the one we have to spend some time on, because the text explicitly notes that this is the dimension leaders ignore the most at their own peril.
It is profound how the author dissects the psychology of change here.
It really is. It acknowledges a fundamental truth about human nature, right? Obedience to a new mission or adopting a new corporate strategy always involves change. And change always means letting go of familiar patterns.
Yes, stepping into a void of uncertainty.
People might look at the data, completely agree with the new direction logically, and nod their heads in the meeting. But emotionally, their nervous system is terrified of what this change will cost them personally.
Absolutely.
They fear the loss of their specific role, their comfort zone, or the traditions they love. The text says that if leadership does not actively acknowledge and shepherd those emotions, passive resistance will emerge everywhere.
Go everywhere.
Even if the new direction is objectively, measurably better, human beings will still mourn the loss of the familiar.
And if we connect this to the broader world of business, it explains exactly why a staggering percentage of corporate change initiatives, mergers, new software rollouts, restructuring, completely fail.
Oh, so?
While management gives the employees the logical data of why the new CRM software is superior, for example, but they completely fail to address the emotional loss the employee feels regarding their sense of competence on the old system.
Oh, that is so true.
You are asking someone to go from being an expert to being a beginner again. If you don't manage that emotional transition, they will fight the new software every step of the way.
The source material shares a story that illustrates this readiness gap beautifully.
Yes, the neighborhood engagement story.
Right. A local church looked at its mapping and realized it desperately needed to engage the surrounding neighborhood in a new way. The demographic data was clear. The theological need was obvious. The leadership team was in total agreement.
Everything looked good on paper.
But the moment they tried to actually take the first practical steps, resistance flared up out of nowhere.
People suddenly claimed they felt unprepared.
Right. Committees started worrying aloud about the financial impact. Longtime members voiced concerns that the existing internal ministries would be neglected if they focused outward.
What seemed incredibly clear and simple in theory became a toxic, messy situation in practice.
So what did they do?
Well, the leadership was faced with a choice. They could flex their authority, force the initiative through, and likely fracture the entire community. Or they could hit pause.
And they chose the pause.
They did.
Yeah.
Not to kill the vision, but to actually prepare the people for it. They spent months focusing on teaching the underlying why, holding town halls to address those simmering relational tensions, and creating emotional margin for people to process the shift.
They recognized that a delay is not inherently a failure.
Exactly. Sometimes a delay is the required preparation. The text notes that in the biblical narrative, God consistently forms a people before entrusting them with greater responsibility. Preparation always precedes commissioning.
Wow.
God doesn't call people who are already perfectly ready. He forms people who are simply willing.
He forms willing ones. I love that framing. But, let's say a group goes through this entire audit. They look at their map, they confront their exhausting busyness, they realize they lack emotional readiness, and they finally admit they have been operating in this fragmented, noisy, treadmill-like way for years. How do they actually pivot? I mean, how do you turn a massive ship around once you realize it's going the wrong way?
The text offers a very specific structured mechanism for this pivot called the mission's renewal commitment.
The mission's renewal commitment.
Yes, it is essentially a spiritual and practical reset button. It is a formalized way for a community to stop the treadmill, get off, and speak plainly about where they actually are.
And it begins with something incredibly uncomfortable in our modern culture, right? Honest confession.
Yeah. The author writes, renewal is never merely cosmetic. It is not a branding shift. It cannot be solved with a new logo or a catchy slogan.
Right.
It has to begin with confession. And the sample confession provided in the text is absolutely piercing. It says, we confess that we often confuse activity with faithfulness and habit with obedience.
Wow. That is a brutal thing to look around a room and admit out loud, to look at 10 years of crowded calendars, exhausted volunteers, and depleted budgets and say, we confused our habits with actual obedience.
It is painful, yeah, but the text argues it's ultimately liberating because it completely cuts through the institutional denial.
It brings everything to the surface.
Exactly. It creates a safe space for a group to finally admit that a legacy program might be deeply beloved by a few vocal people, but it no longer serves the actual mission. It also reminds the community of a core theological principle.
Which is?
That mission is a gift received, not a self-invented project to be managed.
Which takes an immense amount of pressure off the leadership.
So much pressure.
If the mission is not a self-invented project, you are completely removed from the burden of performance. You don't have to manufacture the vision from scratch. You just have to discover how to participate in what is already supposed to be happening.
That's beautifully said. The renewal commitment asks the organization to make 3 very specific shifts in their mindset. It asks them to aggressively seek coherence instead of clutter, obedience instead of impression, and fruitfulness instead of noise.
Okay, let's break that last one down because I think it is the most challenging. Fruitfulness instead of noise. How do we differentiate between fruitfulness and noise in the day-to-day grind?
It's tough.
Because we live in a culture where noise often looks exactly like success.
That is the ultimate temptation for any modern leader. Noise is loud, it is immediate, it creates a massive flurry of activity, it generates metrics you can point to, and it looks incredibly impressive in a quarterly stakeholder newsletter.
Right, everyone flaps.
But the text draws a razor-sharp contrast here. Fruit, in the agricultural and biblical sense, is deeply organic. It is agonizingly patient.
Yeah.
And crucially, it is often completely hidden beneath the soil for a very long time before it becomes visible to the naked eye.
Like a root system. You can't see it growing, but without it, the tree dies.
Exactly. Fruit requires the unseen work of abiding, pruning, and waiting. Noise, on the other hand, can be manufactured overnight with enough budget and a good marketing team.
Wow, fruit cannot be hacked.
Fruit cannot be hacked. Therefore, moving an organization from noise to fruitfulness requires the quiet, unglamorous discipline of obedience over the loud, intoxicating satisfaction of making an immediate impression. It requires trusting the deeply uncomfortable process of slow growth.
Which is brutally hard when our brains and our board members are entirely wired for immediate feedback loops.
Oh, absolutely.
But okay, let's say an organization makes this commitment. They do the confession. They commit to coherence and fruitfulness over noise. A commitment is just an inspiring PDF on a screen until it actually alters human behavior.
Yes.
The text calls this phase incarnation, making the word flesh. How do we turn this beautiful theological, philosophical vision into Monday morning reality?
The text pivots from the philosophical to the brilliantly practical right here. It states that an organization can possess the most excellent convictions in the world and still fail to move an inch because conviction hasn't been translated into an actionable system.
So it's about action.
Yes. Delay in leadership is very often disguised as prudence. We tell ourselves we're just waiting for a little more data or we need to build a little more consensus.
Right.
But actionable items break the spell of endless abstraction. The text outlines 3 highly specific, non-negotiable to-do items to move from insight to incarnation.
And when you first read them, they sound almost deceptively simple. Number 1, draft a 90-day implementation plan. Number 2, assign specific leadership responsibility. Number 3, schedule a formalized follow-up review after the first cycle.
They are simple mechanics, but they are profound when you examine the psychology behind them.
Okay, let's look at the 90-day plan.
Right. The text introduces what it calls a theology of time. Why specifically 90 days? Because it perfectly balances the tension of change. It acknowledges that transformation is urgent, but it is also inherently gradual.
Yeah.
90 days is long enough to teach a new concept, coordinate a team, and actually test something in reality. But it is short enough to maintain people's focus.
It creates a manageable rhythm. Think about traditional goal setting. If you give a team a massive 1-year deadline, human nature guarantees no one will do a single thing about it until month 11, and then everyone will panic.
Exactly.
Conversely, if you give them a 30-day deadline for a major cultural shift, they will immediately burn out. 90 days is that psychological sweet spot.
The author describes it as a mini liturgical cycle of obedience.
Mm.
You name the work that needs to be done. You actually do the work, you pause to examine the work, and you extract the learnings from the work. Then you start again.
But to actually do the work, you need step 2, assigning leadership responsibility. And I want to highlight how the text frames this because it completely reframed my entire view of delegation.
Oh, this part is brilliant.
It says that assigning responsibility is not corporate bureaucracy. It is an act of love.
That is a staggering redefinition of management.
It really is. Think about it. Leaving work in a state of ambiguity deeply burdens a team. If everyone is kind of in charge of a project, the reality is that no one is in charge, and everyone is secretly stressed out wondering who is dropping the ball.
Yes, the anxiety of unassigned tasks.
Right. Naming specifically who owns a task honors that person's specific gifts. It honors the entire team's time by clarifying expectations so no one is stepping on toes. And it honors the mission by ensuring the work doesn't just evaporate.
Yeah.
Good delegation is a leader looking at someone and saying, I trust you. You are equipped to carry this specific piece of the vision faithfully.
Which brings us to the final and most frequently skipped step, the follow-up review. This is where the actual organizational learning happens.
Okay.
The text frames the review as an act of institutional humility. It is a forced admission that the leadership team is not omniscient. It forces everyone back into the room to ask hard questions.
Like, what did we actually do over the last 90 days?
Exactly. What specific lessons did we learn? What actual fruit can we point to?
Yeah.
And perhaps most importantly, what did we completely misunderstand when we started?
There is a fantastic case study in the text of a church that had spent years, literally years, sitting in committee meetings just talking endlessly about their mission, but never actually moving.
Stuck in the mud.
Yes, stuck in the abstraction.
Yeah.
They finally decided to use this exact framework. They drafted a 90-day plan, but they didn't try to boil the ocean and fix everything. They focused specifically on strengthening missionary care.
Okay, narrow focus.
They assigned a small, dedicated team to own that single objective, and they set a hard date on the calendar for a review.
And what was the outcome of that cycle?
By the time they hit that first 90-day review, the missionaries out in the field reported that they actually felt more connected to the home base than they had in a decade.
Oh, wow.
Specific support gaps had been identified and structurally fixed. That one small, structured act of obedience completely reshaped their internal culture. The congregation learned that they were actually capable of executing change. The treadmill was finally turned off, and they were running on the road.
Because forward movement, however small, matters immensely. As the text eloquently points out, the kingdom of God or any profound vision of change rarely advances through grand, sweeping speeches. It advances through small, obedient, structured steps.
Okay, let's pull all of these threads together because we have covered an incredible amount of ground today in this deep dive.
We really have.
We started by auditing our exhausting busyness, recognizing the crucial difference between the treadmill of activity and the marathon of effectiveness. We explored the absolute necessity of demanding mutuality and shared learning in our partnerships rather than falling into the easy transactional trap of dependency.
We examine the surprising freedom that comes from establishing healthy governance. We learn to view structure not as a bureaucratic cage, but as the traffic lights that prevent catastrophic collisions at the intersection.
We talked about the terrifying gap of readiness, specifically emotional readiness, and acknowledging the very real grief that comes with letting go of the familiar.
Yeah, that was huge.
We hit the institutional reset button with the mission's renewal commitment, consciously choosing slow fruitfulness over loud, immediate noise and clearing out the clutter of legacy habits.
Right.
And finally, we brought all of that lofty philosophy down to earth with practical 90-day cycles, clear delegation as an act of love, and brutally honest reviews.
It is an incredibly robust, comprehensive framework for achieving true alignment.
And here is why this entire deep dive matters to you, the listener. Whether you are leading a massive corporate division, running a small tech startup, organizing a neighborhood community garden, or honestly just trying to get a handle on your own family's chaotic weekly schedule, the mechanics of this framework apply to you. You can use these exact tools to stop spinning your wheels in fragmented busyness and start moving with intentional coherence. You can move from just being exhausted by activity to being truly aligned with your purpose.
It requires a profound level of honesty, and it requires the courage to let go of the familiar, comfortable habits that no longer serve your ultimate direction.
It really does. As we wrap up this deep dive, the source material leaves us with a powerful, lingering warning: do not mistake noise for fruitfulness. We know intellectually that real fruit takes a long, long time to ripen quietly, often hidden completely beneath the surface.
But human beings are inherently neurologically wired for immediate feedback. We crave the noise because the noise validates us. It tells us that we exist and that our efforts are being seen right now.
Yes, we want the applause.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So, as you move toward alignment in your own life, or as you try to steer your organization toward coherence, this raises a critical question for you to ponder.
What's the question?
How are you going to sustain your motivation during that long, quiet, completely uncelebrated middle phase? How will you keep running the marathon when the initial enthusiasm has faded, the noise has stopped, the applause is gone, but the fruit hasn't bloomed yet?